Hi everyone, this is Mihai with Pro Tools Training. Today I've got Mike Bernard, live music editor and Pro Tools engineer on NBC's hit show The Voice with me today. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that you took to get here where we are today.
I started back in late 70s, early 80s, actually working in studios as a synthesizer programmer. In the late 80s into early 90s, I was working with Brian Wilson, did his first two records.
Actually, Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys,
from the Beach Boys, yeah. I spoke to them on the phone and they go, do you like the Beach Boys? I said, I was never really a fan. They said, great, come on down. With him, I walked in the room and I had an old Sequential Circuits Prophet 2000 sampler. And he looked at it, he goes, what kind of sounds is this to? I said, anything you want. And he goes, well, can it make the sound of a nuclear explosion? And I went, yeah. That went on to about 5 years of working with them, pretty much one-on-one in the studio. I mean, we did, I think at one point, the longest run was 8 months, just the two of us. One of the original things I was working on was with a friend of mine who was playing keyboards with David Lee Roth, and I was helping him as far as with the MIDI setup that he was using and what would be the best way to put it together. And this kind of went in through the early 90s to the late 90s when I had a friend of mine who basically did the same thing I did. He called me up one day and he said, hey, I'm going to do this tour with Cher. I don't want to do it. Want to do it? Anyway, so that was my first meeting with Paul Mirkovich, who is the MD on The Voice.
So MD, just to clarify for everybody out there, MD is a musical director.
Yeah. When that tour finished, I got a call through some other people I was working with to work with Christina Aguilera.
Okay. So after the tour work that you did with Cher and Christina Aguilera and artists such as that, what happened in your life beyond that point?
The last tour I finished up was with Pink, and he's actually a good artist to work for. I was sort of reunited working with Paul on that one. He called me up and said, what are you doing? And I said, nothing. He goes, I'm working on this show called The Voice. He goes, you want to come in and need you to do some Pro Tools work for him. We got together and with the band and had to go over the first set of songs. It was 170 songs that the band had to learn. We've learned over 1,000 songs.
Wow.
Recorded about 500 songs for iTunes. And this is in 2 years.
It's amazing.
So that's 50 albums worth of material. 2 years.
So you and I first met when Paul called us at Promedia asking us to come out here and spend a little bit of time with you and just kind of go over some things with Pro Tools.
And one of the things, when Paul called you in for me to talk, he goes, oh, talk to this guy Mihai, see if there's anything that he can show you for your workflow. Changing pitch wasn't the problem. It was changing time with Elastic Audio. And I was completely overlooking that and just going, uh-oh.
Because I remember that was something that we did spend quite a bit of time on that day, was going over all the aspects of Elastic Audio.
Right.
It seemed from what you told me then that was a really integral part of what you do on the show. You guys obviously do a lot of Pro Tools work on the show.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you guys encounter every single day in your day-to-day work?
I would say that the main challenge is the speed, I think, that we do everything at. There's things where we are going through maybe 24 songs in a day with contestants, and those songs are recorded, and we have a separate stereo music pass along with a vocal from the contestant, and all of this has to be bounced down and sent to and converted to an MP3 and sent to them via email, so that way they can get it by the time they walk out of the room. When they're done, it's already being sent to them, so they can walk in with a vocal coach and start rehearsing it literally half hour later.
In the context of the show, as you mentioned, Pro Tools is pretty widely used, and I think for most people that have watched the show, you can even see that they also use other components such as the Avid Venue system for the live rehearsals. Do you guys actually record most of that stuff that happens through the rehearsal process when they're working with the mentors or whatnot?
Well, what we've got is we have a venue, and that's our monitor desk. I'm playing back and recording. And then I've also got, like I said, another guy that's actually recording to convert for the contestants. And I'm sort of recording everything as more of an archival thing, because every time we run the song down, I'm recording a pass of it. So if someone does something and we need to go back and say, oh, wait, what did we do on this? Just because of the volume of songs that we're doing. In our truck for the show, the show is mixed on another venue in a remote truck, along with a Pro Tools HD system in there as well.
Now, is the live show, when you guys get to the live portion, is that being recorded as it's being made?
Yeah, that's being recorded as it's being broadcast.
And how does the iTunes part of it play into what you guys are doing? Are you guys actually recording the rehearsals, then piecing songs together? Are you guys going to a recording studio with the contestants?
No, we go into a recording studio. We've been using a studio called Ocean out in Burbank, and that's pretty awesome because that place is what I have here for vintage synths they have there for outboard gear. So every single plugin you can see as far as like vintage plugins, they've got the real thing. So it's actually really nice. It's all done on an old Neve console and all the old compressors and EQs and everything you can imagine in there. And then, for example, when we get to our battle rounds in the show, we'll have two contestants and we have to sometimes record the song on two different keys because we have to do this before the actual show airs to record these so they're available for download. So we don't know who's going to win. So a lot of times we'll record stuff that just never sees the light of day.
So let me ask you, what are some of the most challenging things that you've had to face with working on the show?
I think the most challenging is what to do when a contestant screws up, meaning they lose their place. A lot of times it's not that big of a deal. The band just follows them because we're on a click track and that's the only thing they're hearing is a click. There's a lot of tracks coming from me, especially if we do something that's like a big electronic dance song. We have a contestant that came in 2 bars too late and all of a sudden you have a chorus coming up where it's going to kick in with 24 plus tracks of electronic synths and drum sounds and everything else. So there was that, I just queued up the backup machine on the DR16 and Paul, we were talking to each other on a headset. I was on a headset, he's on a mic up there and he's like, can you get us in on the chorus? I'm like, yeah. Then in the meantime, I've got both hands trying to queue up one machine, switch over to a backup click track that's running so the band can stay in time. And the chorus comes in and punch in and switch over at the same time. And we were all back in sync. Yeah, so that was a punch in, probably in front of the largest audience I've ever punched in front of live, which was 12 million people.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of pressure. It turns out that all the years of the live touring has really come into good use on this show.
What kind of advice would you have for people that are looking to into a work situation like you are or pursue a career path like you're doing?
As you're learning, and even after you're learning, even after you say, okay, I've got this, never be afraid to ask anybody a question. You're not going to look stupid. It just doesn't hurt to always improve on what you know. You don't have to be the fastest person on Pro Tools. I've worked with guys that sit down and do the speed typing, do the thing. And while it might look impressive, I've seen a lot of people make mistakes just from trying to be too fast. And just be thorough in everything you're doing with it. Always keeping up with what's new and what's current, as well as analyzing older recordings and listening to what people have done and do a little bit of research on what was used. I think what would be probably good advice for people learning is get your hands on some of the real gear. You can rent old gear as far as old compressors and EQs, the vintage stuff, and you can rent it at a pretty reasonable price and experiment it. Get an idea of what the real thing does and apply that towards the plugin.
Well, thank you for all the wonderful, wonderful advice and thank you for the time that we spent. It was a real pleasure.
Sure, thank you.